good morning, everyone. And I think we're just a couple minutes ahead of schedule, so I'm just gonna give people time to arrive. Today, we're doing our second live event in our group, and it's about how to know when you're hitting the wall. So buckle up, because we're gonna dive into this topic. So just before we start, I'm Ailsa, and I started this group to help women who are recovering from emotional abuse in a relationship of any kind. My website is www.pleasureforhealth.com. I'm a somatic intimacy educator and a transformational coach, so I'm really happy to be talking to you today live. And I don't have my clock right here, but I think we're about on the time, so hopefully you'll join in if you jump on late. So again, we're talking today about how to really know when you've come smack up against the wall and you've just had it. You know, when you're in that relationship, this is kind of more if you're still in an abusive situation, emotionally abusive, or other kinds of abuse. How to know when you've really reached your limit with that. How do you know that? And many of us are, that have been through that kind of thing, we get in those kind of abusive situations. Often we're really strong women. We can deal with a lot. And, we can endure and endure and endure. And, it just can keep going. We can just somehow find these magical reserves to just keep going. And in a lot of ways our strength is amazing. We do lots of things, but in this particular instance, that ability to just keep going doesn't serve us very well, because we hit a wall and then we somehow manage to scale that, and we hit the next wall, and and before you know it, you're way down the line, a lot further into the rabbit hole of being a victim of abuse than you thought. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about this. So all the signs, we need to really recognize. Last time we talked about how to know where you are, how to recognize that. And we talked about feeling our body and knowing, what are we feeling? And how do we know where we are? And so the physical signs of hitting the wall are obvious to me when I work with people. They're chronically tired, they're exhausted, they're sick all the time, they catch viruses really easily, your immune system is down. And, down the road a little bit, you could be having chronic pain, you have other chronic diseases, you might manifest cancer, lots of things might come up physically to tell you, your body is trying to tell you, hey, this is not okay, the situation is not working for us, we're hitting a wall here. And, as we progress, things might happen. The other thing that shows up quite often for people is accidents. Car accidents are particularly common as a way of, the universe kind of smacking us in the head and saying, wake up, like this, enough is enough, it's time to change something. And I've seen people have multiple car accidents if they didn't listen the first time. So this is a way of recognizing, like, if you're constantly, physically bombarded with challenges, maybe that's not just everyone giving you a hard time, the universe giving you a hard time, you're poor, you're always sick. Maybe your body and the universe is actually trying to give you a wake-up call and saying, get with the program, this is not working. So there's emotional signs as well. If you feel overwhelmed, a lot of people feel just, completely overwhelmed. They're angry, they try to, they become passive aggressive, they cry all the time. All of these, you begin to become a person that you are not really, that's not who you are. And when you start noticing that all you are is this kind of hot mess all the time, that's not who you are. Like, none of us are like that, without all these, stresses on us. So if you notice that you're all over the place and you can't seem to settle into anything, you're definitely up against the wall there, emotionally too. So mentally, you can hit the wall. And for me, I was trying to think about what are some signals about kind of mentally hitting the wall, and I'm sure there's lots. And if you guys come up with anything yourself, feel free to put it in the chat or in the comments afterwards. But for me, the mental wall, it was kind of, I just made myself more busy. I'd like put my head down and I'd do more things. I'd bury myself in whatever little jobs I could do that would take my mind off other things and make me think I was doing something useful and moving forward. But really, all I was doing was just making myself busy so I didn't have to think about where, the situation I was in. And, so putting your head down and just taking on more things. Like, I've seen people take on extra volunteer jobs and, helping look after their friends, moms, kid or something, like you just start taking on a bunch of things because it takes your mind off your own situation. So this is not a good thing. So if you're noticing that about yourself, start catching that. That is a wall that you're coming up against. You're just disengaging from your own life, and you're starting to just, do a lot of things for everyone else. The other thing that comes up is that mental squirrels. Some people call them, like the chatter that just goes around in your head. Well, I can't do this because this is going to happen, and then this will happen, and la 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 la. Just goes around and around and around. And you just come back and you dig yourself into a hole of, I can't change anything. Nothing I do is going to matter. I'm stuck, and then it just goes around and around. So this is not helpful. This is a wall that you're hitting kind of internally in your mind. So we've talked about like physical symptoms of hitting a wall, emotional symptoms, mental symptoms, and I would even go so far as to say there's spiritual symptoms. Like sometimes we end up having like a spiritual crisis almost. You might not use those particular words, but sometimes people just, you end up getting depression, just completely detaching from who you are. And I would call this, you might have totally lost hope, lost faith in anything that you ever believed in. And I'm just putting the label on that those are kind of a spiritual wall that you're hitting there. And, that emptiness, that despair even comes up. So all of these ways of knowing that you've really come to a point, and if you have multiple, usually you've got, signs in all of these areas, it really is a wake-up call for you to say, oh, okay, I'm not happy where I am. I'm just holding steady and I'm just digging myself into an entrenched, pit here. So it's not helpful. So those are all some of the signs that came to me quickly when I was considering this topic of, how to know when you've had enough, when you've hit a wall. And what also came to me that I wanted to share with you guys was, for me, the process was, it took a while. And, I didn't have any support really or anyone around when I was going through this process, and at least at the beginning. And so internally, I had a wall inside, and I had kind of gotten to a point where I knew that I wasn't happy where I was, like I talked about, and I wanted things to change. And I knew that for me, it was more important for me to get out of this relationship and find my authentic self than it was to stay with this person and be liked or be loved or whatever I thought I was getting from this relationship, which, wasn't really real anyway, but the attachment to that idea was so strong that it kept me there. But internally, I was starting to understand that I wasn't being my authentic self. And so I call that kind of an inner wall. Like, I was coming to this understanding that, you know, this wasn't working for me. Now, I didn't change anything in my external situation yet. I needed to strengthen that inner sense of what I wanted and what I was doing in my inner life and who I was. And so for me, there was quite a, you know, I would say even 2 or 3 years for me of working on my inner self to know myself well enough to know how, you know, how to make changes in my outer life. So, you know, you may be at that point where you're kind of starting to recognize, hey, this is not where I was expecting to be at this point in my life. This is not the person that I thought I was with, or, you know, however that works for you. And I need to change something. So working on your, you know, when you hit that kind of inner wall, getting some support and some help at this stage, some really good mentorship can help you to start shaping yourself, well, you know, uncovering yourself really is what it is. It's not so much remaking yourself, but uncovering yourself as to who you really are. So then at some point you will reach a point where you feel strong enough to actually say, you know what, now I've hit my outer wall and things in my outer life need to change. And you'll know, because you've done this inner work, how to move forward with this outer work. So through this process, you know, it is really, I found, you know, it probably would have been impossible without having some mentorship at this stage. And that is, you know, what I would suggest is, you know, it's great that, you know, I've created this group as well. I also have a program, you know, for a few women every month that I help through this process. It's an 8-week process that we do. And then, you know, you keep working, obviously. But because having someone who's gone through the process and kind of say, here's the steps and, you know, here's how you know that you're moving, that can be really helpful at this stage. So I'm just putting that out there. You know, it doesn't have to be me, but find people that have already moved through, are further down, you know, are beyond the wall, that you can look to for support and help. You know, not just friends that are just, you know, trying to make you feel good. You want somebody who's really going to push you, because this is not an easy process. Hitting a wall like this is not an easy process. Recognizing that you're there is not easy. A lot of us end up in these kinds of relationships, like I said, because we're really strong people and because we really want to help someone. And usually the someone is the person that, you know, is abusing us in, you know, an emotional or other way. And we want to help them. We want to fix them. We want to make them better. And it is really tough to realize, not in every case, but in most cases, people that are, you know, abusing other people are just takers, you know, energy vampires, however you want to, you know, look at them. They are not getting better because you do more and more for them. They just take more and more. And when you stop taking, they move on to somebody else and they start the same thing again. So, you know, once you kind of really get that, you want to help them. You can see their gifts. You know, of course, they probably have a kernel of goodness in them. You know, I'm a believer in that too, but you cannot do something for them. So there's some people coming on now. So good morning. Yeah. So really realizing that, you know, we are here because we are strong women, and, you know, you're not going to be able to fix everything. So you got to give up that kind of thing as well. So hitting that inner wall and starting to make some inner changes is the process that I went through. I think it's important because you cannot make changes out, you know, in your outer life unless you know where you are and what you want, and a little bit of, you know, having a really good start on knowing, you know, what are you going to do when you're not putting all your energy and all your time and all your resources into this relationship. Whoever it's with, whether it's, you know, your mother-in-law, your sisters, your, your partner, you know, you're putting everything into them. If you take that back, you need to know what, you know, you need to have some idea what you're going to offer to the world. And I would, you know, my passion really is that the women that are in this group, the ones that I'm talking to, you are the ones that have such strong gifts to offer to the world. And I say that with all sincerity. The women that have been shut down and are trying so hard to help everyone else, it is, you know, it is you that has so many gifts that we need in the world today. We need the people that want to help and everything, but you have to come from a place of knowing yourself and being strong with your boundaries, and not just giving yourself away to, you know, a pointless cause that the person's not going to change. So realizing that here's another little hook that keeps us in this situation too, keeps you behind the wall. You're not a stronger or better person because you endure more. I'm just gonna say that again, because it catches you. You think, I'm such a strong person, look at all the stuff I'm putting up with, I'm enduring all this, like, poor me, but, like, I find my reserves, I keep going. I hear people talk like this, and you gotta let go of the fact that to be a strong person who's, patient and kind and loving, you have to endure this kind of abuse. That's not the case. You could be a strong and loving and kind person and blast through the wall and actually offer your gifts to the world in a better way, and to people that will appreciate what you're doing, and in a way that is coming authentically from you. So just to reiterate a little bit, there's quite a lot of information we've kind of covered this morning. How to know when you're hitting the wall. There was the 4 different kind of ways. The physical way, knowing that you're physically up against the wall. When you are manifesting disease, accidents, pain, cancer, chronic disease, these are your body's ways, not just of telling, beating you up. Your body is your ally. Your body is telling you something that needs to change. You have emotional ways of knowing you're hitting a wall. When you're all over the place, you're passive aggressive, you're angry, you're becoming someone you don't recognize. You're crying all the time. You can't get yourself together. Your mental state, you're either like going in the squirrels, like talking yourself, on this thing, and, a couple of people like, suicidal thoughts even. These are just this is just you getting stuck in your mental chatter, and you're up against a wall. This is, what you want to recognize. And, when you get to the point of having no hope, despair, depression, these are, again, signs of kind of a crisis point. So I hope that's helpful for some of you in recognizing where you are. And, like I said, for me, it was kind of an inner process first, and then that became an outer process. I had enough strength to do that. Again, I would recommend having some support and help, a good counselor, a coach, a therapist, somebody, or more than one, on your side while you go through this process, because there are so many little ways that we talk ourselves back into it. And probably, as many of you notice, you hit the wall, you go back, you hit the wall, you go back, you hit the wall, you go back. This is we get in this pattern. So, to finally get to that place where you hit the wall and you burst through it, or you hit the wall and you're like, okay, I'm done. You open the door and walk through. This is where, where you want to get to with this kind of thing. And again, I'm not saying what the outcome has to be with any of the external parts of your life. Nobody else can decide what the outcome in your life will be, but finding who you are and really working on that and changing some of your perspective about what you want and what you can offer is important. In being able to do that, you can change yourself, and you'll find things sometimes shift in your world, and sometimes they don't. And that is not what we're worried about. We're worried about you inside your own heart, inside your head, and inside your body. How, when have you had enough? And what are you able to do about that and make choices? So again, thank you all for joining me today. I'll leave my details underneath in the comments. Again, I do offer for a few women every month. I have a special in-depth program on how to move through all of this towards having phenomenal intimacy in your relationships, to having, working on your boundaries, your confidence, and really shifting a lot of stuff quickly. I'll leave in the comments how you can get hold of me for that. Otherwise, so great to have you all here, and please leave comments and, tell me how you liked this, and I'll talk to you guys all next week. All right, have a great day.